available on the plenary webpage. Their title will be published in the minutes of this sitting. I'd like to also announce that pursuant to Rule 47.2 of our Rules of Procedure, I have declared admissible two proposals for a Union Act, one on employment protection for the activities of police officers, military personnel, prison officers and customs and border officials, classifying them as high-risk occupations in the EU. The proposal is referred to the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs, and another one on the need to extend the period for implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. This proposal is referred to the Committee on Budgets, the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs as committees responsible, as well as to the Committee on Employment, the Committee on the Environment, the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy, and the Committee on Transport and Tourism for opinion. On Wednesday, 5th of March, the Conference of Presidents adopted the proposal for the calendar of part sessions for the parliamentary year 2026. The dates are available on the plenary webpage, and the deadlines are as follows. Amendment today at 7 p.m. Roll call votes Tuesday, 11th March at 4 p.m. The vote will then take place on Wednesday, 12th March at noon. I'd like to inform the House that I have received multiple requests for points of order. I will go through them one by one. First, I give the floor to Ms. Irache Garcia Perez.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, today marks 5 years since the start of COVID-19. We remember those who died and honor their memory. Faced with the difficult challenge, the European Union worked together in a way we hadn't seen before. We bought vaccines together. We made a digital certificate to help travel safely. We created the Next Generation EU to help our economies recover. This initiative showed that the EU acted together to protect its citizens. Now we face new challenges, like the threat of war. Let us not forget how we handled the COVID-19. We need to be bold and stay united. By learning from that time, we can build a more resilient and cohesive Europe. This helps us face any future crisis with determination and unity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia Perez. I give the floor next to Ms. Zeliana Zovko.
Right, thank you. Madam President, dear colleagues, I would like to draw your attention to the situation of minorities in Syria. In recent days, multiple sources indicated that both the Alawite population and Syria's shrinking Christian community have been deliberately targeted. Extremist factions associated with militant groups have reportedly executed civilians, including women and children. Christian families have endured brutal killings and violent raids at the hands of armed militants who have stormed homes, seized belongings, and claimed innocent lives. The European Union must take decisive action in support of stability and humanitarian relief efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people, including Christians and other affected communities. Christianity in Syria and in some other parts of the Middle East, North of Africa region is at critical crossroads. It will either endure or it will vanish, leaving behind a profound religious, ethnic and cultural void. Europe must not remain indifferent to this existential threat. An External Action Service, with its press release, it's shameful that they did not take this into account. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Zovko. Now I give the floor to Ms. Aphrodite Latinopoulou.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. According to Article 10 and 164, I take the floor. After the Conference of Presidents that adopted the agenda, the MEP of the ECR, Mr. Fragos, in official announcement and using the logo of ECR, he spread fake news to the Greek citizens. And the plenary has to investigate what happened in Tempe. But he also undermined me and the patriots. He claimed that we stopped the investigation of the crime in Tempe. We know, colleagues, that this is not true. And I'm sure that ECR will condemn the lies of Mr. Fragos. He tried to to tell lies to the Greeks and undermine his country, but he also stepped on the dead and he moved hand in hand with the left. Mr. Fragos, enjoy your patriotism. You spoke falsely against the various institutions. And ECR, he doesn't apologize and you hide him. We serious patriots, we have a duty to protect the institutions and also our countries, MEPs, and behaviors like Mr. Frangos are something that is not acceptable.
Dear Madam President, dear colleagues, I take the floor under Rule 39. The right to be who you are, to love who you want, and to live your life free from discrimination is a fundamental European right. That right is clearly under attack. At this critical moment, the decision by the European Commission to announce the withdrawal of the horizontal anti-discrimination directive came as a shock. It also represents a betrayal of all the EU citizens who are currently lacking protection against discrimination. It is time for the EU to show global leadership against discrimination, not to back down. As the European Parliament's rapporteur for this directive, I strongly condemn this decision and I urge the European Commission to immediately reconsider it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kunke. Now I give the floor to Mr. De Masi.
Frau Präsidentin, herzlichen Dank. Madam President, thank you. I'd like to refer to 167 of the Rules of Affairs concerning a point which one of our colleagues just raised. We have been witnessing recently horrific acts of cruelty against the Alawite minority in Syria. The European External Action Service put out a quite grotesque press release in which it pointed the fingers at pro-Assad forces, blaming them for this. You don't need to be a friend of the ex-Assad regime to see this clearly fake news. It's important that the European Parliament send out a clear message so as to ensure that we don't allow such fake news to be spread here.
Thank you, Mr. De Masi. Now, Ms. Boylan.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to raise a point of order relating to the agenda item on the deteriorating situation in Gaza. On February 24th, the official mission of this Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Palestine, of which I am the chair, was supposed to take place. Instead, myself, Rima Hassan MEP, and two officials of this Parliament were detained by the Israeli authorities and subsequently deported. While detained by the Israeli authorities, our electronic devices held by members and staff of the delegation were confiscated for over 90 minutes. Our passports, including an Irish diplomatic passport, was confiscated and were not returned to us until we arrived back in Brussels. This all took place on the same day that the EU-Israel Association Council was taking place, and EU leaders were committing themselves to continue business as usual with Israel, while the Israeli authorities were not allowing us as elected officials to do our jobs. So I ask you, Madam President, that you address this matter urgently.
Thank you. I will. Now, finally, the floor goes to Mr. Mavridis.
Madam President, I will be quite short because the subject has already been mentioned by some of my colleagues. It's with regards to the situation in Syria. Based on reports by agencies that were our sources of information during the Assad regime, hundreds of people have been murdered in their homes, thousands were tortured and kidnapped, including kids and women and men, and much more were expelled by the new jihadist regime simply because the victims are Alawis, Druze or Christians. For this reason, I will kindly ask the following. Let's show our conscience by observing 1 minute silence.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's see how we take it. We have also a debate on this matter where I ask all the members to speak also during that debate. Let's come to the order of business. The final draft agenda as adopted by the COP on the 6th of March pursuant to Rule 163 has been distributed. In accordance with Rule 9.9, the following report is added to the final draft agenda for a vote on Tuesday. Report by Mr. Dainius Zalimas on the request for the waiver of the immunity of Adam Bielan. With the agreement of the political groups, I also wish to put to the House the following proposal for changes to the final draft agenda for Tuesday. The order of debates in the afternoon will change as follows. The debate on the presentation of the proposal on Critical Medicines Act will be taken as the second point, and the debate on the presentation of the proposal on a new common approach on returns will be taken as the third point. If there are no objections to this, then the change will be approved, and we now move to changes requested by the political groups. Starting with Wednesday, the ECR group has requested that Council and Commission statements on recent events in Romania, the ongoing investigation into the presidential candidate, be added as the fifth point in the afternoon before the debate on frozen Russian assets. As a consequence, the sitting would be extended to 11. I give the floor to Mr. Gheorghe Piperea to move the request on behalf of the ECR.
În decurs de 3 luni,
during 3 months, Romania managed to prohibit 2 candidates, to cancel 1 round of elections and to arrest 1 candidate without any evidence. The judiciary system is now a political weapon that can be used against anyone. Both competitors that won the first round of the Romanian elections from the 24th of November 2024, both Lasconi included, to whom the second round was refused, think that the cancellation of elections and prohibiting certain candidates is not acceptable, and it's a Romanian precedent that could extend to the entire Union, and the people would not trust democracy and justice anymore. We do not want that, dear colleagues. The democratic parliament of the European Union is represented by pluralism and free elections, but the democratic system does not trust the options of common people whom they see inapt to decide, to vote responsibly. For the greater good, the European Union has instituted the democratic European shield as a vaccine. But how are we different from the Soviet Union?
Colleagues want to speak against? Does anyone would like? Okay, Mr. Stefanutza, go ahead.
Madam President, based on the rule of law and based on democracy, having such a debate would undermine the very principle of legality in the middle of an ongoing election. Let me tell you something. The proponent that came with this proposal tonight, his party leader yesterday incited for skinning alive of those who made this, who he considers responsible for this. And this in the middle of riots that were violent. Enough with the violence. He said it was a metaphor. Well, a metaphor is what Shakespeare said, that the world is a stage. A metaphor is not when you say skinning people alive, when you put women down, when you put minorities down, when you go against the constitutional base of the country, when you say that ethnicities are less than people. So enough with the hate. Let's not export the hate. Romanians deserve a European, modern, democratic life.
Thank you. So we will put the request of the ECR group to a vote by roll call, and the vote is open. Vote is closed. And it is rejected, so the agenda is unchanged. We move to now a request by the ESN group for Wednesday as well, that has requested that a Commission statement on presidential elections in Romania, particularly the Constitutional Court's ruling of 8th of March, be added as the second point in the afternoon. I give the floor to Ms. Christine Anderson to move the request.
Thank you. Romania has now barred Călin Ceausescu, as my colleague Pipera just pointed out. This is unprecedented in the EU member states. Ladies and gentlemen, if democracy were to effect change, That is the sole reason for having a democracy. You can affect change. But what we're seeing now is actually the people can vote for whoever they want, and if the candidate they don't like, they just bar him or put him in jail. We cannot, as Democrats, we cannot stand for this. The European Commission states, in a healthy democracy, citizens can freely choose their leaders. If the Romanian people choose Ceausescu, why do we interfere and why do we stop it? This has nothing to do with democracy. We need to have a debate on this to get back to our senses. I urge you to vote for this proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Does any colleague want to speak against? Okay, I see a hand up there. Go ahead. Mr. Fidias.
No, Sieper.
Mr. Sieper, yeah, I can't see from far.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, yes, I had a master's gun, if you not recognize me. I was just wondering to that colleague that said, if the people elected this candidate, they didn't elect this candidate in a fair election. It was an election that was scammed by Russian propaganda and Russian bots and Russian influence. And I know that you are fond of stuff like this because it tends to help you as well in our elections. But democracy also includes the free will of the people without manipulation, without foreign interference. And that's the problem here. And it is not that a fair election was taken away. It is that the scammed election was taken away. And if the institutions, the Constitutional Court, the Board of Elections decides like this, you have to respect it. And you cannot just cry aloud because the candidate that you wanted to win was taken away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, let's put the request to the vote of, for the ESN group request to a vote by roll call. Vote is open. Vote is closed. And it is rejected. So the agenda remains unchanged. Now, final request by the Greens group that for Wednesday has requested a Commission statement on secessionists' threats in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the recent escalation to be added as the last point in the afternoon. As a consequence, the sitting would be extended to 11 p.m. I give the floor to Ms. Tineke Strik to move this request on behalf of the Green Group.
Dear Chair, colleagues, amidst all major recent geopolitical developments and our discussions about increasing European security, we must make sure to pay attention to the developments in Bosnia. In recent weeks, the situation became extremely explosive after the President of Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, took further illegal steps towards judicial succession from the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina in response to his conviction by the Bosnian Constitutional Court for undermining the Dayton Peace Accords. And as Putin's puppets in the Balkans, Dodik may do anything the Kremlin tells him, including waging war. So this escalation requires a rapid and strong EU response, as we are not secure without a secure Bosnia. So the Greens IFA group therefore proposes the debate with the title Commission Statement on Secessionist Threats in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the recent escalation without resolution, and we would like to extend the meeting on Wednesday then to 11 p.m.
All right, thank you. So I give the floor to the colleagues who want to speak against. Ms. Zovko.
Right. I strongly commend, Madam President, the intention to speak on Bosnia and Herzegovina and the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina regarding the recent US approach towards Bosnia, towards multilateral organization and towards unresolved situation regarding electoral law reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina. 30 years after Dayton, we still have a high representative who is receiving 26,000 euros a month to keep Bosnia and Herzegovina what? In disarray. We have to address the real issue, that is electoral law reform. We have to close OHR office. We have to bring Bosnia and Herzegovina to European Union because America is leaving. OHR office is staying only with Christian Schmidt, and Peace Implementation Council is highly influenced by Turkey and Russia. This is something that we cannot neglect in this debate. I will join the debate. I'm not speaking against the debate, but this debate should be extended and the title to urgent need to change electoral law reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina and end with international presence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is an issue with the timing here because with the deadlines as we have, the title cannot be changed, but so we vote on the Greens' request. So we put the request to a vote by show of hands. Who is in favor? Who is against? Who abstains? Okay, it is approved and therefore we will have the debate. That means that the agenda is adopted and the order of business is thus established.
Okay, colleagues, please, if you want to have a small discussion, have them outside of the hemicycle so we can start to proceed with the next agenda item. Ďakujem. Ďalším colleagues, please, if you want to talk, can you please do it outside of the hemicycle, but even better would be if you stay for the next debate, because indeed it's an important one. Ďalším bodom programu je vyhlásenie komisie.
Another point of our program is the communication by the Commission. It is supporting the EU's most vulnerable regions against devastating effects of climate change, such as the recent cyclone hitting La Réunion. And we will accept only those speakers who are in the list. We will not accept any blue cards. And I would like to give the floor to the Commissioner Kobilius. Thank you.
Honourable Chair, honourable members, in recent weeks, many communities have faced hardship caused by the devastating effects of climate change. The recent cyclones, Garanche in La Réunion and Chido in Mayotte, serve as stark reminders of the vulnerability faced by our outermost regions. Let me express the European Commission's unwavering solidarity with our fellow Europeans in La Réunion and Mayotte. These regions are on the front line of climate change, facing extreme weather events and their devastating impacts. As a Union, we are committed to assisting in their recovery from the current disasters. At the same time, we stand ready to support them in building resilience, improving preparedness, and adapting. In immediate terms, the European Union can offer support upon request from the French authorities. For example, the Copernicus Emergency Management Service has been instrumental in providing satellite-based damage assessments, ensuring a rapid and effective response. In addition, the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism enables swift coordination of aid, including the deployment of disaster response experts and critical equipment. We have already demonstrated the effectiveness of this mechanism in Mayotte. 5 European Union member states, Belgium, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and Sweden, responded swiftly to Cyclone Chido, providing essential emergency supplies such as family tents and medical shelters. This is European solidarity in action. Concrete, practical support when it is needed most. However, beyond immediate assistance, our focus must also be on long-term resilience. First, we are mobilizing financial resources to aid recovery efforts. The European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund Plus are key instruments for reconstruction. The Restore regulation, which Vice President Fito has the pleasure of discussing with many of you, is allowing major flexibilities for Mayotte. The European Union Solidarity Fund, established as a post-disaster relief instrument, stands ready to provide financial support. Last Friday, France submitted an application to the European Union's Solidarity Fund regarding the damage caused by Cyclone Chido in December 2024. The Commission will now proceed with an assessment of the application. In the longer term, the Commission is currently working on the first European climate adaptation plan to enhance preparedness and protection for our communities. This is being developed alongside the Preparedness Union strategy, which will enable a more proactive approach to crisis management across the European Union. Among the key risks identified are climate change, extreme weather events, and environmental degradation, all of which demand our urgent attention. Second, disaster risk management is a key priority under cohesion policy, allowing member states to allocate resources according to their specific risks. A total of 21 member states, including France, have planned direct investments in disaster risk management. With a total of 14.4 billion euros allocated between 2021 and 2027. These investments focus on prevention and preparedness, including nature-based solutions that not only reduce risks, but also offer wide environmental and societal benefits. The mid-term review of cohesion policy will also provide member states with an opportunity to allocate additional resources to meet emerging needs. For every euro invested in disaster prevention, the return in avoided recovery costs can range from 2 to 10 euros. These investments are already making a difference. By strengthening resilience, we are reducing the flood risk for over 40 million people and lowering wildfire vulnerability for over 130 million people. And third, beyond financial support, cohesion policy promotes climate adaptation through nature-based solutions and the development of resilient infrastructure. To ensure the effectiveness of investments, member states intending to invest in risk management are required to submit risk management plans guiding their decisions. This is a precondition for receiving cohesion policy support. Additionally, under the current programming period, all EU-funded infrastructure projects must undergo a climate-proofing assessment. This ensures climate neutrality and resilience, aligning with do no significant harm principle. And to support these efforts, technical assistance is available. Honourable members, cohesion policy will continue to strengthen the resilience of our member states and regions, reducing their vulnerability to climate change and future disasters. Let me assure you that the Commission remains fully committed to supporting disaster risk management efforts and enhancing the European Union's resilience to large-scale disasters. Together, through solidarity and strategic investment, we can build a safer and more resilient future for all. Thank you.
Ďakujem, pán komisár. A teraz
Thank you, Commissioner. Now I give the floor to a colleague, Luca Nalik, for...
Thank you very much. On the 28th of February 2025, an unprecedented cyclone arrived and hit La Réunion. 5 people died and there was a great deal of damage. The French state has announced that there will be 200 million euros available and advanced grants for farmers. The Commission has put forward another 100 million euros to rebuild the island. The President of the island, Hugues Bello, has turned to the European Union. La Réunion must benefit from funds under the ESF and the Restore mechanism. That will help to rebuild buildings, to provide support to those who have lost their homes. The Restore mechanism can reuse ERDF and other funds in order to rebuild as quickly as possible, so that there can be rebuilding of infrastructure but also provision of supplies. Access to European funds is often believed to be difficult and complex. Together with the French public partners, we can prove the opposite. We can bring normal life back to La Réunion. The geopolitical situation is forefront in all of our minds, but we mustn't forget about solidarity for the victims of those in Europe who are facing natural disasters, particularly in the outermost regions. None of us will have forgotten what happened in Mayotte. For the outermost regions, Commissioner, simplification is needed, and we need to work with alacrity and efficiency too.
Ďakujem pekne a teraz poprosím kolegyňu Mebarek.
Thank you, Madam Mebarek from the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Climate change is hitting La Réunion ever more severely, as we've seen with Cyclone Garance. There were 5 deaths, hundreds of people were casualties, houses that were suffered from power cuts, problems with agriculture. The population is affected, and that's why it's important that our Parliament can express all of its solidarity with the people in La Réunion. Europe should address the distress that's caused by these problems. As was the case in Mayotte, France has to help with the mobilization of the European Solidarity Funds to help La Réunion to reconstruct. We also have to activate the Restore mechanism to help to repair now, but also to prepare for tomorrow, to help deal with agricultural losses and help the sector to resume its activity so that we can protect populations and can accelerate adaptation to the new climate realities. Beyond the immediate urgency, though, this disaster recalls once again the need for a European policy that is more ambitious for our regions at our far borders, who are at the very face of the problems of climate change. We need to build capacity for adaptation, participation and reconstruction by investing in resilient infrastructure and better early warning mechanisms, as well as more responsive support mechanisms. In the face of this tragedy, Europe needs to work in specific fashion to help the people in Réunion. We have to offer solidarity and the assurances of the EU so that we won't leave our regions behind. Thank you very much.
Ďakujem pekne. A teraz poprosím kolegyňu Braziekla za skupinu Patrioti pre Európu. Nech sa páči.
And now Mrs. Braziekla for Patriots for Europe.
Madame la Présidente, chers
President, ladies and gentlemen, this is the second natural disaster in just 2 months to affect France. After Mayotte, the cyclone Garot, which hit Reunion Island on the 28th of February, demonstrated just how exposed our island is to climate change. With peaks of 230 kilometres an hour on one of the mountains, it caused the death of 5 people and enormous damage, costing hundreds of millions of euros. 160,000 homes have had power cuts, 310,000 without drinking water. Roads have been destroyed, and agricultural crops costing tens of millions of euros have been destroyed. As we speak, thousands of homes are still without water, electricity and telecoms. It's vital that we invest in resilient infrastructure, in particular those resisting cyclones, so as to guarantee energy sufficiency to better prepare the island for future storms. This preparation, of course, requires accelerated deployment of European funds. I'm thinking, for example, of the Restore Fund, and recent disasters in Europe have made these more necessary than ever. The French overseas territories are an important part of Europe. We shouldn't forget it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, colleague Gregory Allion from Renew Group Europe.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues.
President, colleagues, on the 28th of February, just 2 months after Chido in Mayotte, the Garance cyclone swept through La Réunion, causing 5 deaths and many more casualties. This is terrible, but there was also infrastructure damage. Roads cut off, no drinking water, infrastructure destroyed, and the agricultural sector has been affected by gusts of wind over 200 kilometers per hour. So sugarcane, banana, strawberries were all affected. The sugarcane producers have lost almost all their harvest. This is tragic, but these are not one-off natural disasters. They're more and more common. They're part of daily life, and we're all affected by climate change. In particular, the outermost regions are affected. Because of their geographical situation, they are at the front line of climate change. They show us what we will have to deal with in mainland Europe in the future. Today, we are investing in the resilience of those islands for our future. I have spoken time and time again in this assembly, even though this is my first time in Parliament, but I've spoken about this issue 5 times already. I've asked for support for the outermost regions and those who have been affected by these disasters, but I've also wanted to remind the European Union that it must shoulder these challenges by preparing a strategy for the future and by preparing the next MFF. We must prepare to prevent and to repair. We must really help these regions that have been affected, particularly by the civil protection mechanism, by the Solidarity Fund, and the Solidarity Fund, together with the Cohesion Fund, needs to become more flexible. We need to become more prepared, have a culture of preparedness, so that those who are most likely to face climate change disaster are prepared so that they can deal with these climate breakdown. I myself have worked on the front line, and I can tell you that every gesture can save a life.
Thank you. Madame Toussaint for the group of the Greens European Free Alliance. Thank you.
Voilà à nouveau.
Once again, La Réunion is hit by an unprecedentedly strong cyclone. Last year, there was already a great deal of damage, but Garance is even worse than last year. We had Chido and Mayotte, and now this one is even worse. How do we understand, when are we going to understand that we have to accelerate rather than pausing our regulations around climate change? 5 people died in La Réunion. Thousands of people lost access to electricity and water. Once again, farmers are losing their harvest. And one of the poorest towns in the island saw families losing their homes. France declared a state of natural disaster, but it should also deal with the issue of prices and of labour. Managing territory means that we need to stop building in zones, in flood areas, and areas that can be affected by climate change. We need to help to protect the populations and nature and stop investing in new roads that are useless. Turning now to solidarity. The most vulnerable people are always the first to be affected, so they need to be at the heart of our future European strategy for facing up to climate change. Colleagues, Let us not make La Réunion a new symbol of our inactivity, but rather let us put it at the heart of all of our actions.
Thank you very much. Now, as the next speaker, the Vice President, Mr. Omarjee, has the floor on behalf of the left.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Please allow me, first of all, as an inhabitant of Reunion Islands, to express my gratitude to all political groups for having agreed to hold this debate, which underlines the solidarity extended by the European Union to the people of Reunion Island, whose island has been devastated by the strength of this recent cyclone, Garance. So our thoughts go out this evening to the victims, their loved ones, and to all of those who've lost everything. From this chamber, I would like to underline the fact that we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. The European Union must mobilise all its resources so as to ensure that we can show full solidarity, and we must do this immediately, as you said, Commissioner. I very much commend the decision taken by the President of the Regional Council of Reunion Island, Huguette Bello, to activate the Restore Fund, which I had the honour of defending here in the European Parliament as rapporteur. Thanks to this fund, it will be possible to free up 100 million euros, I repeat 100 million, so as to support those families who've lost their homes, to repair damaged roads and to restore damaged infrastructure. Moreover, changes we've made to the ERDF will enable us to provide immediate relief to farmers with 40,000 euros earmarked for every farm which has been damaged. Just to wind up, President, I'd like to underline that these natural disasters mean we have to face up to our responsibilities when it comes to fighting climate breakdown around the world. We have to ensure that islands, which are particularly exposed and fragile, be the centrepiece of an invigorated climate policy. I'd like to wind up by saying on behalf of the people of Reunion that we should all praise them for their strength and resilience. They will stand strong despite what has happened to them.
Thank you very much. As the next speaker, Madame Bosdorf, on behalf of the ESN, the floor is yours.
Traumhafte Strände, tropisches Klima.
Tropical climates, volcanic landscape, lots of music, Creole dancing, wonderful food. Who wouldn't like to go to these kinds of islands, including islands like La Réunion in the Indian Ocean, and it's a French enclave. It's breathtaking, according to the websites. But there are cyclones which affect this part of the world, and not seldom. And so there are 5 different levels of cyclone, from yellow to black, 1 to 5. And there was a recent cyclone going over 200 kilometers per hour. It led to floods, electricity and water being unavailable, and sadly 5 people lost their lives. And what does the EU make out of all this? Instead of providing non-bureaucratic aid, as France did, what the France is doing instead is making a link between this weather event and mankind-caused climate change. You know, this is an island. These are islands that have always been affected by cyclones, and instead we hear people banging on about climate change. The climate continues to change. None of us can say how big our influence on the climate is. None of us can answer the question about whether our measures will actually affect the environment, the climate, and our homes. Perhaps what we're doing in terms of measures could backfire on us. There will be damage if people such as Georgescu in Romania are not allowed to take part in elections and take up their posts. And if they're being excluded, that's the kind of storm that Europe ought to fear, because that is a storm that could quickly develop into a cyclone, and the fallout could be quite dramatic.
Well, thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Commissioner Kubilius to speak on behalf of the Commission. The floor is yours.
Honourable Chair, honourable members, thank you for sharing your insights during this very meaningful discussion. And thank you for advocating for those in some of our most vulnerable regions. The recent cyclones affecting Mayotte and La Réunion remind us of the urgent need to reinforce disaster resilience and climate adaptation measures across the Union. The European Union's response to these events demonstrates our unwavering solidarity and commitment to supporting affected communities, not only in the immediate aftermath, but also in the long-term rebuilding process. Through disaster risk management investments and strategic climate adaptation planning, we are working to reduce vulnerability and strengthen preparedness. The importance of early warning systems, nature-based solutions, and targeted financial instruments cannot be overstated. They are essential components of a comprehensive approach to disaster resilience, ensuring that regions can withstand future challenges. The Commission remains a steadfast partner in these efforts. We will continue to mobilize resources, provide technical assistance, and foster collaboration between Member States. Our goal is clear: to build a more resilient and better prepared Europe in the face of an increasingly unpredictable climate. As always, we count on the cooperation and support of the Parliament as we strive to achieve this goal. Let us work together to protect our people, our communities, and our shared future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This concludes the debate on this point. And looking on the clock, let me check whether we have the Commissioner Albuquerque coming to join us. She doesn't seem to be in the plenary at the moment, and we will need to make a short break before she arrives. Apologies, we need to suspend the session for a few minutes and wait for Commissioner Albuquerque or other representative of the Commission. So a few minutes of your patience, please.
I'm sorry, colleagues, for the interruption, but we're trying to locate the Commissioner, which has not arrived yet, and try to figure out what is this. So I would like to ask you for a bit of patience for the moment. We're working on it.
So, thank you. I have received requests from the competent authorities in Belgium for the parliamentary immunity of Elisabetta Gualmini and Alessandra Moretti to be waived, and also former member Helmut Goiking has submitted a request for defense of his parliamentary immunity in the context of legal proceedings in Germany. These requests are all referred to the Committee on Legal Affairs.
So, dear colleagues, we will start the debate on the Commission statement without the Commission present, and I have to say this is really appalling, but this is not really a time for us to sit and relax, and I think this is going to be made quite clear to the Commission that this is not unacceptable to have a Commissioner here for this actually really important debate on znižovanie byrokracie a zjednodušenie.
The theme of the debate is cutting red tape and simplifying business in the EU, the first Ómnibus proposals.
Ask colleague Tobe for the EPP to open the debate. Yes. Give me 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, President. I think we're all waiting for the Commissioner to deign to take an interest in our debate, to deign to come to the hemicycle, to deign to come and present this package. I don't know if the Commissioner is having meetings with lobbies or banks to continue to deregulate. But I think that we can't have a debate that's as important as this one without the Commissioner actually being here. Therefore, I'd like to ask, if possible, if we might reschedule the debate so that the Commissioner could actually be present, and so that at some time they would actually show us some respect rather than disrespecting us, which they do unfortunately too often.
I was informed that the reason is a traffic jam, not a meeting with lobbyists. I'm sorry to disappoint you there, but I still believe that there are enough Commission officials listening to this broadcast anyway, and I think that this House should not be stuck because of this. So I would like to give the floor to Thomas Tobe to open the debate. Yes, in 15 minutes.
Well, thank you, President and colleagues. Europe is falling behind in growth and competitiveness. And in these uncertain times, we must act decisively and, of course, try to boost our economy. Europe needs a game changer. An omnibus proposal is a step in the right direction, but more is needed. Growth, not bureaucracy, will drive our economy forward and power the green transition. To deliver, we need two key things. First, clarity and breathing room for our European companies. The Stop the Clock proposal must enter into force as soon as possible. That is why EPP is calling for a faster approach under an urgent procedure. Second, we have to deliver on content. We can do more to simplify this legislation, and the EPP will push for further measures in the upcoming negotiation. We also call on all constructive forces of this House to join us in this. Europeans expect us to protect their jobs and improve their lives. The EPP is ready to lead and try to unlock the potential of our economy. And this is also what is best for climate and for sustainability. I would argue that a growing European economy is the best climate policy that we could have. On our continent, we have the highest standard and also the most ambitious climate policy in the world. Taking down European economy is counterproductive. So, the big debate here now, and especially I'm turning to my friends and colleagues on the left. Now the question is, will you stand for growth and jobs or red tape and bureaucracy? Europe cannot afford to wait. It is time to act. Thank you.
Ďakujem pekne.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Madame Bischoff for the group of S&D.
Mr. President, colleagues, I mean, who does not like to have simple legislation with a high level of legal certainty? We call it the art of doing legislation. Anyone? I don't think so, even that the Commission is not here. We as S&D support this. We engage in simplification, and we want to better protect SMEs from multinationals putting their obligations on them. But surprise, if you really look at the package, you can see that quite a few of these proposals don't deliver on simplification. And Ómnibus, I think the term is to maximize, confuse people because they don't know what an omnibus here is. If you look at this, 4 very different legal proposals, you will find out that these are legal proposals we worked on. We found compromises in this House. We found majorities in the last mandate. But if you look at 2 of these 4 omnibus packages, especially if you look at the due diligence proposals, it is poor deregulation. It is not simplification. And it's not rational proposals for simplification. It affects real people. You're talking about growth and jobs. We are talking about growth and good jobs, also for the fruit picker from Morocco, also for the child that has to dig minerals, or the transport worker that works here and delivers our products. And therefore, I mean, these proposals were written by multinationals, by business lobbyists that lobbied for that for a long time. And EPP, colleague to be. Instead of talking with the other political groups, like S&D, like Renew and the Greens, you cowboy-like march through without any talking to come up with a fast procedure here. But if you do that, and I think the art of doing law in Europe was finding good compromises. It was not the cowboy style of marching through and just push, push, push without having good legislation. Because what good legislation can come out of this without any consultation, without any legal assessments here to march through? And I have to say, Mr. Tobe, but also to Mr. Weber, it has consequences if you leave the path how we did legislation in the past and you want to do it with the far right in this House. You have the choice to negotiate with us for simplification, for better protecting SMEs, or you march through with the right here, but this will have consequences for the whole legal term. And in this sense, I hope you come to your senses. Thank you.
Ďakujem pekne. A teraz poprosím kolegu.
Thank you. Now, colleague Dostálova for Patriots for Europe.
Evropská komise.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. The European Commission promises to reduce bureaucracy by 25%. It should bring business relief worth 6 billion euros and mobilize investments of 50 billion euros. Sounds great, but why are entrepreneurs so unhappy? Because instead of giving our businesses the freedom they need, Brussels is busy coming up with even more rules. Brussels forgot to inform the banks about simplification regarding ESG, etc. While the Commission hosts press conferences, our businesses are collapsing. What about the industry? German steel production is now on the brink of collapse, and Czech businesses, Czech car manufacturers employing thousands of people are facing endless waves of new regulation. And there's a lot of red tape that stifles production and innovation. Europe does not need cosmetic changes and bureaucracy. Europe needs real steps, fewer regulations, more support for entrepreneurs, less interference, and return to common sense in politics. Today, the European Commission declares, entrepreneurs, we will save you. But they forgot to mention that the European Commission strapped concrete boots to their feet. Regarding ESG, this is clearly visible. Why do we not vote on the postponement of reporting even today or at this session? Because our businesses need simplification. Thank you. Colleague Bochinski for ECR Group.
Nearly all members of the European Parliament agree that we have to rapidly change the direction of the EU. The Commission and the bureaucracy it created generate time spent on idleness and overcoming obstacles which were invented in the mind of the leftists. Because of that reckless attitude, we, the Europeans, are in huge danger. EU is losing the international race. China and US are growing faster, more stable and more innovative. Many nations are mocking the EU. With such excessive bureaucracy, our continent has become a sick man of the world. We urgently need to deregulate our economy. We have to break the chains that hinder our growth. The Commission is proposing the Ómnibus package. It is a step in the right direction, but it's a very small step. It's not enough. The Ómnibus initiative is shallow. You are trying to avoid making, Madam is absent, of course, you are trying to avoid making hard decisions. We need new deregulations which we shout, cut, 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 and once again cut. We have to throw a lot of directives into trash where they belong. There is a lot of work ahead of us to get rid of the unnecessary burdens from our economy. Omnibus proposal needs to be amended and extended. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Canfin from Renew Europe.
Monsieur le Président. Thank you, President. I would like to speak in particular to our EPP representatives who are sitting just in front of me. I'd like to make it clear to them that in fact it's you who've got the choice. We can all move quickly together in this process of simplification without falling into the excesses we've just heard from right-wing and extreme right groups. You have the choice. We in Renew are willing to go very fast working on the basis of the Commission proposal. We can discuss the details, but when it comes to finding a balance, for example, with CSRD, that's part of the Omnibus package, we can't. It's true that there are deferrals, postponements, but we do actually maintain some very important points, such as double materiality. So you have another choice, is to not negotiate with us, but to negotiate with the extreme right. If you go down that road, you will then undermine any hope we might have to maintain confidence in the von der Leyen majority. We need the von der Leyen majority. You need the von der Leyen majority so as to face this crisis, this political crisis. Europe needs this more than ever. You won't do this by working with the extreme right, by working with those who've just reminded us that the worst possible thing which could happen to the steel sector is CSRD. Because we all know their good friends on the extreme right, including Donald Trump, will be imposing tariffs on steel. So you've got a choice. Either you make a smart choice and work with us, or you get out your chainsaw and work with the extreme right.
Ďakujem pekne a teraz poprosím.
Thank you. Now, Madame Toussaint for the group of the Greens and European Free Alliance.
Bonjour, chers collègues.
Dear colleagues, I too want to speak to the European right. I can't speak to the Commission, can I? You talk about simplification, but you are gutting the protection afforded to the European economy while we're under threat. You want to deregulate rather than sovereignty, because you're proposing the abandonment of the rare tools we have, which stop products made by Uyghurs, forced labor, from entering the market. There's also American shale gas coming in from the US, which is produced unfairly, and you say that this will help. Pull yourselves together. We do need simplification. We've all said that today, but you're not simplifying. You've decided to go at breakneck speed towards deregulation. You are undermining our sovereignty. You're undermining our values and the green transition towards a sustainable economy, because you are taking apart what we built, and that puts off investors who are already on the path of change. So you are punishing virtue and you are encouraging vice. You say that companies won't comply with their climate obligations, but they can continue to do business as usual. But should we encourage people who harm the environment? You want an 80% drop in the number of companies covered by transparency rules, such as the mining industry, a high-risk industry. Does that make sense? No, you can't pull the wool over our eyes. If you choose to work with the far right, you will be choosing not to cut red tape, but to extend impunity, and we will fight back against that kind of policy.
Thank you. And now, colleague Aubrey for the Left Group in the European Parliament.
Chers collègues,
Colleagues, Madam Commissioner, very pleased that you finally made it to the European Parliament. I don't know if there was an omnibus in your way, but I'd like to begin with quite a simple question for you. Has Donald Trump become your model? Because evidently, his great wave of deregulation has reached this side of the Atlantic. I imagine you in the European Commission. The planet is falling apart. Multinationals continue to profit from violating human rights. And you say, Eureka, let's get rid of the only regulation that we have to keep companies accountable. With this omnibus package, you're offering carte blanche to those companies that want to destroy the planet and want to exploit workers. You are getting rid of this requirement for them to be vigilant by limiting responsibility only to direct partners. This is betraying a principle. These are companies like Total, and they will continue to violate human rights and to destroy the environment with impunity. But while we are here, you can count on my group to fight to keep regulation and not let multinationals just do what they want and profit from our lives alone. Thank you.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím kolegu
Thank you. Now, colleague Szczypniewski for the Europe of Sovereign Nations.
Szanowni Państwo, Bruksela.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, Brussels promises deregulation. But this is rather like letting the wolf into the sheep pen. For decades now, the European Commission has been suffocating us with regulations, and now they say they're going to simplify everything. This is like an arsonist saying he wants to become a firefighter. This is not a revolution. These are just cosmetic changes. The European Union doesn't want to do away with red tape. It simply wants to better administer red tape. The Ómnibus proposal is little more than a slight rewriting of the text. It's not an attempt to do away with red tape. If we really want to liberate our businesses, We need to fire up the chainsaw, as President Millet said. That's what we need, a chainsaw rather than a letter opener. So rather than having 3 documents, you now have to follow 1 document, but the print will be very small. That's not a solution. The Commission talks about simplification, but at the same time it continues to roll out the Green Deal and a whole series of other regulations. This is like a rucksack full of stones. That won't help. If we really do say that CSRD will never apply to 80% of companies, that won't mean the remaining 20% will be freed. Let's remove this obligation from all businesses. The problem is not that regulations are too complex. It's simply a problem of volume of regulations. It's what we need is not to simplify rules. It's simply to guarantee that the EU doesn't adopt any new rules. So we've heard a lot about red tape. Large businesses, multinationals can cope with red tape, but small companies can't. It's simply too much for them. So we have to be absolutely determined to remove red tape, to prevent the adoption of new regulations, and in this way we really can reduce bureaucracy in the Europe.
Now, with the delay, I would like to give the floor to Madam Commissioner.
Honourable Chair, honourable members, apologies for the delay. Still, thank you for the opportunity to join you today to outline the main elements of the Commission's communication on implementation and simplification, the strong simplification dimension of the 2025 Commission Work Programme, and our first Omnibus proposals, which we presented at the end of last month. Allow me to begin with the bigger picture. The world is changing in front of our eyes. We see dramatic shifts in the geopolitical landscape. We need to treat these developments as a call to action. The freedoms that we enjoy and the values that we cherish can no longer be taken for granted in a complex and more conflictual world. For the EU, they also depend on maintaining and further developing our economic base by adapting, innovating, and competing in the world. This is why the Commission has prioritized enhancing Europe's competitiveness in this new mandate. Cutting red tape is an important element of building that competitive Europe. We have set out ambitious targets for administrative costs, reducing them by 25% for all companies and 35% for SMEs, all while ensuring cost-effective delivery of the underlying policy priorities. This translates into cutting roughly 37.5 billion euros in annual administrative costs by the end of this Commission's mandate. And in the end, more innovation and investment will bring prosperity and wealth for our citizens. Put simply, we cannot hope to successfully compete in a perilous world with one hand behind our backs. I want to be very clear that we remain deeply committed to building a greener and fairer society and economy. Simplification is about making sure that EU rules help deliver, rather than impede, the achievement of our economic, social, environmental, and security goals, and bring wealth and prosperity to our citizens. It is about achieving those goals in a smarter and less burdensome way. Less bureaucracy means more innovation and investment that will secure our long-term prosperity. It means creating new and quality jobs for European workers. Our communication on implementation and simplification outlines a comprehensive set of tools to sharpen the quality of our regulatory framework and to deliver on our agreed objectives. It is constructed around 4 building blocks: ensuring EU policies deliver results, making Europe simpler and faster, improving the way we make new rules, and strengthening our work with co-legislators and stakeholders. Taken together, it signals a change in the regulatory culture of the European Commission, focused on making sure that EU rules are as simple and cost-effective as possible while they deliver on the ground. We are already translating the principles of this second block into concrete actions, starting with those announced in the 2025 Commission Work Programme. 11 out of the 18 new initiatives in the work programme aim at simplification, and they are complemented by 37 fitness checks and evaluations, which will in turn feed future simplification work. The main simplification proposals for 2025 are the following. A first omnibus proposal on sustainability reporting, which we already presented last month and to which I will return in a moment. Investment simplification, facilitating the deployment and reporting of InvestEU and the European Fund for Strategic Investments. A package including a new definition of small mid-caps so that they can benefit from more targeted proportionate requirements. A digital package to ensure a simplified and more agile means to facilitate once-only reporting to avoid duplications. A proposal to reduce complexity and administrative burden for farmers and national administrations in the context of the Common Agricultural Policy. And an omnibus proposal to further simplify rules in the defence sector. As I have mentioned, the Commission already presented the first two omnibus proposals to simplify EU rules at the end of last month. The omnibus package covers a far-reaching simplification in the fields of sustainability reporting, sustainability due diligence and taxonomy. The omnibus package on investment simplification facilitates, amongst others, the deployment and reporting of InvestEU and the European Fund for Strategic Investments and simplifies reporting. Briefly, these proposals provide for a stop-the-clock proposal to delay the application of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive for companies that have not started reporting yet, freeing around 80% of companies currently under the scope of CSRD from mandatory reporting requirements and protecting them from excessive information requests by large companies. Making taxonomy reporting more proportionate by limiting mandatory reporting only to very large companies. A major simplification to the carbon border adjustment mechanism that limits obligations for approximately 182,000 or 90% of importers, most of which are SMEs. These first two omnibus packages mark a strong start to delivering our simplification agenda. A conservative estimate puts the annual savings stemming from these two packages at 6.3 billion euros. To conclude, honourable members, as you can see, this Commission is firmly committed to improving implementation and delivering simpler and more cost-efficient rules. We hope to count on your support so that we can deliver fast and sustained changes on the ground in the coming months and years. I will stop here and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Ďakujem pekne. A teraz poprosím.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner, and now colleague Pereira from the EPP.
In recent months, we have heard about many things that are lacking. Lack of investment, innovation, and skills. All these things are lacking, but today I want to talk to you about excesses. Europe has an excess of regulation, percentages, and inconsequential debates. In recent years, the EPP group, the PSD, and I have alerted that there is an excess amount of regulation strangling European companies, preventing their ability to invest, create jobs, and generate wealth. But now we have an opportunity to do things differently. So what we see is that there are too many percentages in political discourse. We talk about 99.8% of companies in Europe being SMEs, but we forget that there are 26 million companies behind this percentage. We talk about the 52% of added value that SMEs create, but we forget the 90 million workers behind this. We mustn't make decisions based on percentages, but we must act on behalf of people. Finally, we have too many debates. We have debates that accuse the Commission of wanting to kill the Green Deal, but it was the President of the Commission who came up with the Green Deal. And then we have the far right, which sees Europe as nothing more than a target to spread its propaganda. But we We are working in a different space, a space of moderation where we try to release resources for companies so that they can comply with the Green Deal. We want to work within a space where companies can invest and create jobs, where they don't get bogged down in bureaucracy. To conclude, to say to Ms. Bischoff in English.
With everyone, we are just not ready to destroy whatever is left of our European competitiveness. Thank you.
There is a blue card for you from Mr. Oliveira. Do you accept it? Please. Yes.
Obrigado, Sr. Presidente.
President, Ms. Pereira, your problem is apparently bureaucracy. But instead of focusing on bureaucracy and ensuring compliance with environment and pollution, you are focusing on SMEs. But why don't you make SMEs' lives easier? We have these small mid-caps, and why are they being treated in the same way as SMEs? The real issue isn't being dealt with. The fact is, the Ómnibus package will help multinationals and big companies, rather than providing help.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Deputado, pela...
Thank you very much for that question. I will respond in the following way. What we have on the table here is balanced. It shows the EU's leadership, and what we're trying to do with Ómnibus is find a way to provide results for both the environment and the economy. We can't help the environment if we don't have a strong economic fabric to support the environment. And then we mustn't forget the European social model, the European social welfare model. We can only pay for that if we are more competitive, if we generate wealth, and if we remove red tape for our companies.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím.
Thank you very much, and now I'd like to ask Madame Wolters to speak.
Thank you, Chair. The European Commission promised us a simplification of EU rules for companies without compromising on the landmark green ambitions of the last mandate. What's not to like, you would think, after all, with the current economic backdrop? Efforts to simplify, digitize, streamline, those are to be welcomed, and we as a group could certainly see room for doing that. But I will tell you what's not to like, and that this is not the simplification of EU rules, this is the simplification of a debate. It's an oversimplification of a debate, and it's a harmful one. What we're presented here with is removing liability from a law that says to check and address things like child labor and deforestation. Now, clearly, that's not simplification, that's obstructing justice. That's purposefully making things harder for the victims of wrongdoing and NGOs. That's making a mockery of EU law, essentially. Liability is not just there for the sake of it, it's there to guarantee fairness and a level playing field between cowboy companies and companies that give a damn. Also, asking companies to only check their direct suppliers, that's pointless box ticking for companies. You're asking them to look at places where there's no issues and no risks, and you're giving them a blank check to ignore risks that are further down their supply chain. Another example, banning companies from requesting information from companies of less than 1,000 employees. That will just mean that their reporting is going to be inaccurate, incomplete, and very difficult to comply. And now we talk about red tape. Make no mistake, this is regulatory schizophrenia that's going to end up increasing compliance costs. Companies have already invested in sustainability, and now the Commission is pulling the rug from underneath their feet. I think this is the kind of nonsense that can only be come up with when people go on what must be an ideological crusade, and that at breakneck speed, refusing to consider real evidence or with a public consultation. And truly, the European Commission should be ashamed of this proposal. It claims that this is the middle ground, that it's a sensible proposal that's sorely needed, but it is an extreme proposal. Let's be clear on that. It radically slashes human rights and environmental standards, and it actually makes things more complicated. And what's more, this is a dishonest reading of what the Draghi report has called for. No company is leaving the EU because of sustainability reporting. Could things be improved? Yes, of course. Let's have a sensible conversation about that. But there's no company that risks bankruptcy unless we tell them that it's okay to have children make their products. And this House now has a responsibility to get things back on track, to deliver actual simplification. And unfortunately, the EPP has already been mind-blowingly open about their willingness to work here with the extreme right. And that's not even plan B for the EPP, it seems, that's plan A. And the Commission has been absolutely fine to present its proposal under these circumstances. They knew that this couldn't gain a pro-European majority in this form, but it went ahead anyway. It's time to call this out for what it is. It's an extreme proposal, it's blatantly misguided, and it's backed by the fossil fuel industry and the far right. Thank you.
Excuse me, blue card? Madam Walters, will you accept the blue card from Mr. Tobé? Please.
No. Thank you, President, and thank you, colleague Wolters, for your intervention. I understand that SND is not welcoming this proposal, but I think it is extremely important for our competitiveness, and that we understand that we need also to grow our European economy. That is actually also good for sustainability and for our climate goals. We have the most ambitious climate policy on our continent. And my question is to SND, you asked to work with us. We are ready to work with everybody here. But the question is, what is SND actually ready to change in the current proposals? What is it?
Wait.
Mike.
Yes.
Mr. Toubé, you say that you're ready to work with us, and yet you didn't appoint people from the EPP for a long time to talk to us, and then after we talked together, you made statements in Politico that made it clear that you would only work with us if it suited you. So that's a difficult basis to start from. But when it comes to what we could actually do to simplify, there's many things that we could be discussing reasonably, but there hasn't been time for that because of a PR stunt from the European Commission that insists on proposing things within the first 100 days. I don't think there's any necessity to rush things like that, and therefore we're now faced with proposals that are misguided. And I think it's a little bit like saying that if you're driving on the motorway, cars will be able to drive faster without speed limits. And that's certainly true, but you're also going to have collisions.
Thank you very much. We'll stick with, given the length of the speakers list, to one blue card per speaker. Thank you for understanding. And now I'd like to give the floor to Madame Győri for 1.5 minutes.
Köszönöm szépen, jó reggelt, Európai Bizottság, örülök, hogy
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, dear Commission. It's good to see you have woken up, because previously greening resulted in 5,000 new pieces of legislation for companies, and from the EPP to the Communists, the whole House supported all this. And then now the same political groups are asking for simplification. Ridiculous. Omnibus 1 and 2, they come late, and they are not enough. Practically it's just cosmetics, trying to repair some cracks. We did tell you that the direction was wrong. You damaged Europe. You are against Europe. Well, the proposal tries to achieve simplification, but it is not ambitious enough. We need more than this window dressing. We need to check what the problems are on the regulatory side, what hinders companies in getting resources, innovating and working, focusing on their work instead of writing reports and dealing with paperwork. You don't touch taxonomy. You are practically working on an ideological basis. You keep to green ideology, which will overcome competitiveness again. of course, companies would have access to more resources. For example, if you, for political reasons, didn't stop paying the resources that my country is entitled to. We should work together for prosperity, but unfortunately, you are undermining prosperity too. European companies deserve more. We need a company-friendly change, and that's why that's what we are working for, we patriots. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Madame Sberna. The floor is yours.
Grazie Presidente, Commissario.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know what we're talking about here? Do you know if those who want to open a business in Europe want clear rules, less obstacles, less red tape? The numbers say it all. 80 billion euros are spent every year by small Italian companies to carry out administrative procedures. If we bear in mind the impact of this on families and businesses, it's 225 billion euros. Europe can't allow itself to do this, nor indeed can Italy. The first Omnibus package represents a somewhat late recognition of what's going on, but it's necessary. We've got the threshold of 220 to 1,000 businesses. That would lead to 80% of businesses being excluded from the scope of this SRD directive. Red tape is like an invisible tax. You don't pay customs duties, but there's a tax on businesses, and this blocks investment, it blocks growth. Investment opens up a road, but it's not enough yet. The time has come for turn words into practical action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Madame Hahn. The floor is yours, Svenja.
Uľavilo sa mi, že pani von der Leyen sa rozhodla, že napraví to, čo sa tu zlého urobilo a že predovšetkým tie dodavateľské reťazce budú vyňaté, ale musím povedať...
On the English channel, which I appreciate, but it's not something that... Can you start again, please?
Of course. So, I'll start again. Ich bin ja erleichtert.
I'm relieved that Mrs. von der Leyen is ready to correct her poorly made laws. Above all, when it comes to the Supply Chain Act, we said at the time that the scope and the liability needed to be limited, and it's good that that's finally happening. I would go further, though, and say it would be better if the Commission took the Supply Chain Act and withdrew it. There is still too much red tape in it, and there's not enough effective protection of human rights. Despite that, the Omnibus law has to come. It's a minimum for reducing bureaucracy and strengthening competitiveness. That's why I have an honest question. Have colleagues from the Social Democrats and the Greens not realised how difficult the situation is for the European economy? I think it's really irresponsible the way some people here want to wave away any simplification and reduction of red tape. And if I look towards Berlin, the exploratory paper there also doesn't reassure me that the union there is really serious about reform after the election. That's why I call on the Commission. We still need a lot more simplification. We need the reduction of superfluous laws and regulations, and that's why we need new omnibuses, and the next one has to be a digital omnibus, because we need to deal with the panoply of digital legislation that we have. We need to be world leaders in innovation and not in regulation. Thank you very much.
Ďakujem pekne. A teraz poprosím kolegyňu Cavazzini.
Thank you very much. And now, Madame Cavazzini, the floor is yours.
Ja, vielen Dank, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Colleagues, zero tolerance when it comes to child labour. Ursula von der Leyen said that here herself, and she was applauded for that. And she said that a few years ago. But what's left over after that? The EU supply chain law is going to be sacrificed before it even comes into force. That very law, which would prevent terrible working conditions and exploitations. Commissioner, this is terrible when it comes to form. The ink is barely dry. We don't even know whether this set of laws leads to bureaucracy. We've got companies who've invested, who've changed things, and now I'm hearing from my citizens, we don't want our coffee or textiles to have been produced with children's hands. And now you have this constant hesitation, this back and forth, that destroys trust in EU legislation. Now let me say a word about the content. You said that you want to reduce some reporting. Yes, we do need to provide relief for SMEs, but your proposal will not provide relief. It is not just a reduction in reporting. No, it is massive deregulation. You will endanger the very goals of the legislation. You know, you're talking about reporting, but what about civil liability? What about the reduction of fines? How does that help? And it's the first link in the supply chain that is often the most dangerous part, and there won't be checks anymore. We as the Greens are in favour of simplification, but we are not in favour of deregulation.
Thank you very much, and now Madam Anderson, the floor is yours.
Puhemies, kyse ei ole sääntelyn purkamisesta. Haluamme.
Thank you. We're talking about administrative simplification, or should I say deregulation. The message we're getting from the Commission is we should do things better. This is not the first time. However, now faced with this Ómnibus package, I think we've all seen the documents, and having seen it, it's fair to say that most of what we heard simply isn't true. You have to identify whose interests are best served by this deregulation. The answer is large companies. We want to tolerate failure to comply with environmental human rights regulations. What about liability and the directive on that? This is an attempt to sideline small companies and to disregard human rights violations. I think we should ensure that we fully understand what's going on in the full length of the supply chain. We have to identify the implications of these changes for human rights. We need to know what companies are doing in Europe and the implications and repercussions of that in Thailand or elsewhere.
And just one because I will have to start to be stricter with the time because we're running late. So I would like to give the floor next to colleague Badia Jover.
Thank you very much, President. Europe urgently needs innovation, growth and jobs. To achieve this, it's essential that we reduce bureaucracy that's strangling our companies. That's why we in the EPP celebrate the Omnibus package and the advances in getting rid of unnecessary bureaucracy, creating an economy that's more competitive and favours innovation. This package is a step in the right direction, but there's room for improvement. Reducing administrative burden needs to go further so that European companies can grow without regulatory obstacles. Clear examples are the obligations under the CSRD, which forces many companies to draft reports on sustainability even when they're part of groups of companies that present consolidated data. With the Omnibus package, we've introduced changes that eliminate redundancies, but European companies still have to spend a lot of resources on complying with bureaucratic requirements rather than doing business. The strategic economy that we talk about won't be possible if we don't make it easier for companies to innovate and make us wealthier in Europe. We need to compete on an equal footing with other regions of the world.